He poured a cold milkshake on her head and laughed. He thought it was just a joke. He thought everyone around would stay silent. He thought this girl was an easy target, but he had no idea who was behind her. He didn't know she was Chuck Norris's daughter. And when the legend comes for justice, the laughter disappears, confidence turns to dust, and fear becomes the only thing he can feel. Don't blink. Never mess with Chuck Norris's family. Saturday mornings had a special kind of magic in the Norris household. They weren't glamorous or extraordinary, but they carried a quiet warmth that made the world feel gentle, at least for a few hours. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting golden rectangles across the wooden floor as Sophia sat on a tall stool, lazily stirring her glass of orange juice. The faint sound of country music hummed through the speakers, and the smell of something burning drifted from the stove. Her father's deep voice cut through the silence, laced with a mix of frustration and humor. "Why is it that I can defeat armies single-handedly, but pancakes defeat me every time?" He stared down at the smoking pan like it was an enemy he had once underestimated. Sophia giggled and slid down from the stool to help him. "Dad, I told you, the heat shouldn't be that high," she said as she turned the knob down, rescuing the pan before it could burst into flames. Chuck Norris. Yes, the Chuck Norris sighed dramatically, crossing his arms as if offended that cooking dared to challenge him. "I set it to the lowest level," he argued. "That's the highest." He looked at the stove, then at her, then back at the stove, narrowing his eyes suspiciously. "The stove is lying to me." Sophia laughed, and in that moment, everything felt right. It wasn't often that the outside world, with all its noise and expectations, felt as distant as it did now. Here in this kitchen, Chuck Norris wasn't a legend or an action star or an unstoppable meme about invincibility. He was just Dad, a man who tried too hard to cook Saturday pancakes because it was their tradition. Her favorite sneakers shuffled against the tile as she poured pancake batter into the pan herself. He watched as if she were performing some rare and incredible martial arts technique. "You get that skill from me," he proudly declared. "Mom taught me," she corrected softly. The room quieted, not awkwardly, but with a shared understanding. There were pictures of her mother all over the house, smiling, full of life, with rich dark hair that flowed freely in the wind in photographs. Cancer had taken her 3 years ago, turning their cozy home into a battlefield of grief. Chuck fought that war too, but there was no stunt choreography or stage punches in that fight. Just a desperate husband who would have traded every trophy, every medal, every movie role for one more day with her. Now every Saturday morning was a reminder of the promise he made beside his wife's hospital bed. Protect Sophia. Keep her safe. Be strong but gentle. He looked at his daughter now, seeing so much of his wife reflected in her eyes. Sophia carried the same tenderness, the same quiet resilience. He reached out and brushed a pink streak of hair behind her ear. She insisted on dyeing that one little lock. He let her, because she said it made her feel like her mom was still with her. The little streak symbolized courage and individuality, and Chuck admired that more than Sophia knew. "So," he said, clearing his throat to lighten the mood again, "what time are you meeting your friends?" 3 o'clock, she said, flipping a pancake like a pro. "We're going to Rosie's Diner for milkshakes." Chuck smiled. He loved Rosie's Diner classic red booths, shiny floors, and the best burgers around. It had become a Norris family staple. Milkshakes, burgers, French fries. "You girls sure know how to live on the edge," he teased. "We're rebels," she said with a mock-serious face. He chuckled. "I can drive you, you know." "That's okay. Jess's mom is dropping us off," she replied, adjusting her shirt and checking her reflection in the microwave door. She was wearing a clean white blouse, simple, but beautiful. "Anyway, you have your meeting at the gym later, right?" He nodded. He trained young martial artists on weekends, not future action stars, but regular kids who needed confidence and discipline. That work grounded him. "I'll still pick you up afterward," Sophia grinned. "Of course you will. You don't let me out of your sight for long." It was said jokingly, but both of them knew it carried some truth. He couldn't help the need to always make sure she was okay. The world was dangerous, even without the criminals and villains he fought on screen. Chuck walked over, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Just text me if you need anything. And I mean anything. I don't care if it's a spilled drink or a broken heart. I'm there. She smiled up at him, the kind of smile that could tame his fiercest storms. I know, Dad. Hours later, when Sophia walked out the door with her backpack slung across her shoulder and her hair expertly braided also by Chuck, who had learned that skill just to make her smile, she felt like the day would be perfect. She hugged him quickly before leaving, and as he watched her stride confidently down the driveway to meet her friends, he whispered a silent promise. I will always protect you. Sophia and her two best friends, Emma and Jessica, arrived at Rosie's a little early. The diner was buzzing with weekend energy as they slid into their favorite booth near the jukebox. They ordered chili fries and milkshakes, laughing and gossiping about school teachers who didn't know how to pronounce names, the weird smell in locker room B, and, reluctantly mentioned, boys. So, Emma said with an exaggerated wink, nudging Sophia's shoulder, are you going to tell us or not? Tell you what? Sophia rolled her eyes, though her cheeks reddened slightly. Who you keep texting? Jessica chimed in. We see you smiling at your phone, girl. Don't lie. He's just a friend, Sophia said, a bit too quickly. A friend with nice hair? Emma teased. A friend who sits behind you in math? Jessica guessed. A friend who maybe asked you to the fall dance? Emma added dramatically. Sophia covered her face with both hands, laughing. Oh my gosh, stop! They all burst into giggles, and Sophia took a sip of her strawberry milkshake, savoring the sweetness. It felt safe here. It felt normal. It felt like she could just be a girl, not the daughter of a living legend. That safety dissolved the moment the diner door opened and silence rippled across the room. Tyler Hendricks walked in like he owned the place. Tall, perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive jacket, ego the size of Texas. His two friends, Brad and Connor, trailed behind him like poorly trained guard dogs. Everyone in school knew his type, the son of a powerful man who built his confidence out of money and fear. Teachers avoided conflict with him. Students avoided him altogether. And lately, Tyler had been paying too much attention to Sophia. He spotted her almost instantly. His grin appeared slick, predatory, and he sauntered over. Well, 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 he said, leaning over their table. If it isn't the quiet little princess. His eyes dropped to her blouse, to the pink streak in her hair. Looks like you tried to look nice today. For who? Certainly not for me. Sophia stiffened, her voice caught in her throat. Please, just leave me alone. Oh, I'm just trying to get to know you, Tyler said, mock sincerity dripping from every syllable. You never talk about your family. What's the deal? Dad ran off? In jail? Embarrassed to be seen with you? Emma, trembling but brave, spoke up. Back off, Tyler. He turned sharply to her, hissed in her face. Say one more word and I'll tell everyone about those photos of you from last year. Remember those? Emma's lips snapped shut, her eyes filling with tears. Tyler leaned closer to Sophia, his breath cold against her cheek. Answer the question. What does Daddy do? He must be pretty pathetic if you won't even mention him. Sophia's hands shook. She stared down at her milkshake. She tried so hard to remain invisible to boys like him. Tyler picked up the glass right out of her hand. I think this is more your style anyway, he snarled. The cold pink liquid splashed over her hair, over her shoulders, over her precious white blouse. The blouse her mother gave her. Gasps erupted. A waitress dropped a mug. A child began to cry. Phone slid upward, recording. Sophia sat frozen, shivering not from the cold, but from humiliation that swallowed her whole. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the milkshake. Tyler and his friends laughed wildly. Oops, he said casually. My hand slipped. But hey, look on the bright side. Pink suits you. He turned his back and strutted toward the exit, basking in the cowardly laughter of his friends. Sophia bolted from her seat, nearly tripping as she ran to the bathroom. Her sobs echoed against the tiled walls. Emma and Jessica followed quickly, trying to comfort her. She could barely breathe. This would be everywhere by Monday. Everyone would see it. Everyone would laugh. Meanwhile, Martha, the gray-haired waitress who had watched Sophia grow up, had tears in her eyes as she pulled out her phone. Chuck had once given her his number, saying calmly but firmly, "If anything happens to my daughter when I'm not there, you call me." Her fingers trembled as she hit the call button. "Mr. Norris," she whispered, "please, you need to come." 10 minutes later, the diner door swung open with a thunderous bang that made every head turn. Chuck Norris stood in the doorway, not as a hero from the silver screen, not as an invincible fighter, but as a father who had just learned that someone harmed his child. His jaw clenched. His eyes, usually warm and full of humor, were sharp, cold, and deadly focused. He scanned the room, saw Martha's tear-filled eyes, and immediately moved toward her. "Where is she?" he asked, voice calm, but beneath it, rage like a roaring storm. Martha could only raise a shaking hand and point toward the bathroom. Chuck didn't waste a single second. The world around him faded to a blur. All he could think of was his little girl, crying alone. And for the first time that day, the universe's quiet Saturday magic shattered, and something far more powerful awakened. The day everything changed had only just begun. Chuck moved down the hallway toward the women's restroom, each step driven by a quiet force far stronger than anger alone. He had been furious many times in his life, during fights, on missions, in moments when he faced real danger. But none of those compared to seeing his daughter hurt. The closer he got to the bathroom door, the more the scent of artificial strawberry sweetness made his stomach knot. It was a scent that shouldn't have been associated with pain. It shouldn't have been on her. He stopped in front of the door and knocked gently. "Sophia, it's me." His voice was soft, barely louder than a whisper, as if he feared speaking too firmly might break her even more. Inside, Sophia froze mid-sob, the voice she had known since she first opened her eyes, the safest voice in the world. "Daddy," she choked out, the words shattering into pieces. Chuck pushed the door just a crack, waiting for permission. "Can I come in?" There was no hesitation. The lock clicked, and the door opened fully to reveal his little girl, a mess of sticky pink streaks, wet hair clinging to her face, blouse ruined, eyes swollen and red from crying. Sophia tried to speak, but the moment she saw him, whatever strength she was attempting to hold on to collapsed. She threw herself into his arms, and Chuck caught her instantly, wrapping her so tightly it was as though he feared the world might try to snatch her away again. He said nothing for a long time. He just held her while she cried into his chest. He stroked her damp hair, ignoring the sticky residue staining his shirt. None of that mattered not when his daughter looked so small and heartbroken. When her sobs finally softened, he gently leaned back enough to look into her face. Her mascara had run down to her chin, and there were tiny red spots on her cheeks from the cold shock of the milkshake. "Tell me," he said softly, not a command, a plea. "Tell me what happened." Her voice trembled as she recounted everything: Tyler's insults, the cruelty toward Emma, the mockery about her father, the laughter, the cameras. Every detail etched itself into Chuck's expression. The flash of fury in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw, the breath he drew in sharply when she mentioned the blouse being a gift from her mother. By the time she finished, her voice had turned raw with exhaustion and shame. She stared down at the floor. "Everyone saw. They filmed it. It's probably already online." She shivered violently. "I can't go back to school, Dad. They'll all laugh at me." Chuck reached out and lifted her chin with 2 fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Listen to me," he said firmly, but with so much love, it made her eyes fill with tears again. "No one has the right to make you feel like you're less than who you are. You are strong. You are kind. You are everything your mother and I ever hoped you would be. What he did today, what those people allowed to happen, does not define you." A tear slid down her cheek. He brushed it away with his thumb. "And as for that boy..." Chuck's voice deepened, like thunder rolling beneath calm skies. He crossed a line he never should have approached. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. The terror she had felt moments earlier surged back, not because she feared Tyler, but because she feared what her father might do. Because she loved him too much to lose him. "Dad," she whispered, gripping his arm with both hands, "please promise me you won't do anything that you'll regret. I can't lose you too. I can't." That plea hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes. He remembered holding his wife's hand as she told him, Protect our daughter, but don't let anger steal you from her. He inhaled slowly. I promise you I won't do anything that takes me away from you, Chuck said, but I won't allow someone to hurt you and walk away thinking he can do it again. Sophia nodded, though fear still lingered in her eyes. Chuck stood up, keeping a hand on her shoulder. We're getting out of here, he said. Let's clean you up first. He turned toward the door but found Martha standing there, concern etched into her face. She stepped inside quietly, holding a stack of clean towels and a damp cloth. Sweetheart, she said to Sophia, let me help. As Martha dabbed gently at Sophia's hair, Chuck stepped to the side with her for a private word. She explained what she had witnessed. She had been working at Rosie's for over 20 years and had seen kids act out before, but never like this. She told him the boy's name, Tyler Hendricks. Riverside High, Oakwood Estates, the gated mansions near the hills. He's hurt others before, she whispered. There's always a check written, a story changed, a threat made to whoever talks. His father, he's someone who believes money means power. Chuck listened, arms folded, expression carved from stone. And right after he humiliated her, Martha continued, he laughed his way out and headed to the mall with his friends, like nothing happened. Chuck's eyes flicked toward the restroom mirror. Sophia was staring back at her reflection, sad, humiliated, and trying desperately not to look ruined by it. A father's heart can only break so much before something else happens. Resolve. I will handle this, he said, voice calm. Too calm. Martha bit her lip. She was a mother too. She recognized that calm for what it truly was, a storm held together only by sheer willpower. Be careful, she whispered. Chuck returned to Sophia just as she finished washing the last of the milkshake from her arms. Her blouse was a lost cause, pink stains spread across the fabric like wounds that wouldn't heal. He slipped off his own jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her frame, heavy and warm, but she hugged it tightly, comforted by its weight. Thank you, she murmured. We're leaving, he said. But when she stood up, she hesitated. Her eyes drifted toward the diner's front doors, toward the world waiting outside, a world that had recorded her humiliation and done nothing. Dad, she whispered, I want to see you talk to him. I don't want to be afraid anymore. Chuck placed his hands on both of her shoulders. You don't need to prove anything. Not to me, not to anyone. I know, she said, voice steadier now. But if I hide, he wins. Chuck studied her closely, seeing so much strength in her despite the pain. He nodded slowly. All right, but you stay with me. You do exactly as I say, and you don't get close to him. Understood? Yeah, she agreed. He pulled out his phone. Already, 3 different people had sent him the video. Angles from multiple tables. Full audio. He saved everyone. They weren't just proof, they were leverage. Martha caught his eye. They went to Riverside Mall, she confirmed. Chuck nodded once. Thank you. As he guided Sophia toward the exit, his hand never once left her, back protective, steady, ready. The patrons of the diner parted as they walked by. No one dared meet Chuck's eyes for long. They saw in him what Tyler had never imagined, the unwavering, unstoppable wrath of a father. They stepped outside. Chuck opened the passenger door of his truck for Sophia. She climbed in silently, wrapping his jacket tighter around herself like a suit of armor. He got behind the wheel, put the truck in gear, and drove. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was a bond and understanding, the kind forged only when 2 people confront fear together. Sophia looked at her father's hands gripping the steering wheel. She had seen those same hands on movie posters holding weapons, defeating villains, performing impossible feats. But today, they weren't the hands of a legend. They were the hands of the man she trusted most. Dad? She whispered. Yes? You'll be careful too. Right? Chuck exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed ahead, the mall looming in the distance like a battleground. For you, he said, I will be. And with that unbreakable vow, the truck rolled into the parking lot. The storm was already at the mall. It was just waiting for Chuck Norris to arrive. The ride to the mall felt longer than it actually was. The truck rolled through familiar streets, past shops and playgrounds and quiet suburban homes. But all of it blurred together in Sophia's eyes. She clutched her father's jacket like a lifeline. The humiliation still burned under her skin, that terrible coldness of milkshake drying against her scalp replaced by the heat of shame and anger. She hadn't dared to check her phone, terrified of what might already be circulating online. The only comfort she had was that her dad was beside her, solid, unshakable, the one person she knew would never allow the world to tear her down without a fight. Chuck didn't say a word as he drove. His face was calm, almost expressionless, but Sophia knew him too well. She knew what rested in that silence, rage held on a tight leash. It was a silence far more dangerous than shouting. She could see the way his jaw clenched, the slight tremor in his fingers that held the steering wheel. He was thinking, planning, calculating every step before he took it. The truck turned into Riverside Mall's parking lot, pulling into a space near the entrance. The mall glistened with glass and bright banners, buzzing with weekend life. Families strolled in and out, shopping bags swinging, children excitedly tugging on parents' hands. It felt wrong that the world continued so peacefully while she was drowning inside. Chuck shut the engine off and looked at her. His eyes softened just enough to let her breathe. "You ready?" he asked quietly. Sophia swallowed hard but nodded. "Yeah." He reached over and gently squeezed her hand, a silent promise that she was not facing this alone. They stepped out of the truck and walked toward the entrance. The doors slid open automatically, releasing a wave of cool air, and the hum of voices, clattering trays from the food court, and distant pop music echoing off the wide marble floors. Sophia stayed close to her father, her fingers gripping his jacket sleeve. Every few steps, someone looked up, and then did a double take. Chuck Norris still carried an unmistakable presence. People whispered, nudged each other, pulled out phones. Some recognized him instantly. Others simply sensed that this was not a man to stand in the way of. They moved through the mall until the sound of teenage laughter cut through the noise. Chuck followed it like a hunter following a trail. The laughter grew sharper, crueler, familiar. It led straight to the food court. There he was. Tyler sat perched on the back of a chair like it was a throne, phone in hand, showing something on the screen to a group of students who howled with laughter. The screen was bright enough that Sophia recognized the video instantly. Her video, her humiliation. She felt the floor tilt beneath her feet, panic clawing at her chest. Tyler noticed the shift in the atmosphere. People nearby had stopped walking. Conversations quieted. Phones lifted, sensing something significant was about to unfold. He turned to Remorse and noticed the girl with the pink-stained hair. His grin widened. "Well, if it isn't strawberry milkshake," he said loudly, making his friend snicker. "Did Daddy come to clean?" His voice died as Chuck stepped forward. Chuck didn't move fast, but the space between them closed like a trap snapping shut. Tyler's smirk flickered. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping harshly against the polished floor. He was taller than Sophia, but under Chuck's gaze he suddenly looked small, like a boy caught playing with fire. "You must be Tyler," Chuck said calmly, the quiet edge in his voice slicing through the tension like a blade. Tyler cleared his throat and straightened his expensive leather jacket. "Who the hell are you supposed to be?" A gasp rippled through the crowd. Connor slapped Brad on the arm, whispering too loudly, "Dude, that's Chuck freaking Norris." Tyler scoffed at them, forcing a laugh. "So what? You think some washed-up actor can tell me what to do?" Sophia flinched at the venom in his voice. Chuck didn't react, not outwardly, but his eyes darkened, and for a split second, Tyler stepped back, instinctively, like a deer confronted with a predator. "You poured a milkshake on my daughter," Chuck said. "You threatened her friends. You humiliated her. And now you're showing the footage to anyone who will watch." Tyler regained a hint of his bravado. "It was a joke. She's overreacting." Chuck took one step closer, just one, and Tyler stumbled backward into his chair. "A joke?" Chuck repeated softly. "Humiliating a girl in front of a room of strangers, recording it, laughing at her pain. That's a joke to you?" He reached forward faster than anyone could blink. Tyler's phone flew from his hand, hitting the floor and skittering across the tiles with a loud clatter. Gasps echoed around them. "What the—" Before Tyler could react, Chuck's hand was gripping his wrist, twisting smoothly and efficiently, forcing the boy down to his knees. It wasn't violent, just perfectly measured restraint. But the shock and pain in Tyler's eyes were instant. He tried to struggle, but Chuck's strength was impenetrable. It was like trying to break a steel beam with bare hands. "Listen to me carefully," Chuck said, his voice low enough for Tyler alone at first. Then he spoke louder. "You are a bully. You think hurting people makes you powerful. You think no one will stop you." The gathered crowd watched in a silence so complete that the music overhead became oddly intrusive. "But power isn't measured by how many people you can push down," Chuck continued. "It's measured by how many you lift up, something you clearly haven't learned." Tyler coughed nervously, sweat breaking on his forehead. "Let go of me. You can't do this. My dad will—" "I don't care about your father," Chuck said, cutting him off, "or his money, or his threats. Right now it's just you, and the consequences of what you did." With a small shove, Chuck released him. Tyler scrambled backward, breathing heavily, rubbing his wrist like it was broken, though it wasn't. Chuck had made sure of that. Chuck took out his phone and pressed play. The sound of Tyler laughing, the splash of the milkshake, Sophia's stifled sobs. Every second of the assault echoed across the stunned food court. He paused the video. "You humiliated her publicly," Chuck said. "Now you will apologize publicly." Tyler's face drained of all color. He shook his head rapidly. "No way, I'm not saying—" Sophia took a deep breath, and something within her shifted. She stepped forward slightly from behind her father. That broken girl in the diner bathroom still existed, but she was no longer alone. Chuck glanced at her, proud, encouraging, and looked back to Tyler. "You will apologize," he stated again. "Right now." Tyler looked around for support, but his friends had backed far away, hands raised in surrender. The crowd surrounding them stared with judgment and disgust. For once in his privileged life, there was no shield of money, no indulgent adults swooping in to defend him. There was only the truth of who he really was. His lips trembled. His voice cracked. "I'm sorry." Chuck raised an eyebrow. "Louder." Tyler's hands curled into fists, then loosened. His eyes met Sophia's. For the first time, he saw not a target or an object to mock. He saw a person he had hurt. "I'm sorry, okay?" Tyler's voice grew stronger. "I'm sorry for what I did. It wasn't funny. It was cruel. And you didn't deserve it." Sophia stared at him and saw something she never expected. Fear. Not the fear of fists or pain, the fear of facing oneself. Chuck nodded slightly. That was enough. Not forgiveness, not redemption. Just what was owed. But Tyler wasn't finished. His voice dropped to a pleading whisper meant only for Chuck. "Please, don't tell my dad." Chuck leaned forward, his voice now low enough for only Tyler to hear. "If you ever come near her again, you'll be begging that your father is the one who deals with you." Tyler's breath hitched. Chuck straightened and turned to Sophia. "We're done here," he said. The crowd parted instantly as they walked away. Most of the phones that had recorded their arrival now recorded their departure. But the focus was different this time. Gone was the video of a girl being humiliated, replaced by one where she was defended, where justice stood tall beside her with the calm strength of a man who would cross the world to protect his child. Sophia's heart pounded as they stepped out into the sunlight. The air felt lighter, fresher, as if she could breathe again, but tears still welled in her eyes. Chuck wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You did great," he murmured. "I was terrified," she whispered back. "That's how courage works," he said. "Being strong doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you don't let fear win." Sophia hugged him tightly, burying her face in his chest. The scent of his cologne, familiar, comforting, washed over her. Relief crashed into her chest so hard she almost laughed and cried at the same time. She had never felt safer. But as father and daughter walked toward the parking lot, neither noticed the eyes watching from a distance. A stranger tapping angrily on his phone. Someone preparing the first move in the next battle. This wasn't over. Not yet. Chuck and Sophia drove home in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than earlier. The suffocating fear that had wrapped itself around Sophia's heart since the diner was loosening, replaced by something steadier, warmer security. She stared out the window at the passing city lights that flickered like stars fallen to earth. For the first time since the milkshake hit her skin, she could breathe without her chest trembling. She didn't feel small anymore. Not while he was here. When they arrived home, Chuck guided her inside with a protective hand resting on her back. His jacket still hung over her shoulders, heavy but comforting. She moved immediately toward the bathroom to shower. She needed to scrub away the sticky residue, the awful reminder of what had happened. He waited outside the bathroom door as the water began to run, leaning back against the wall with his arms crossed tightly. Every drop of running water seemed to fuel the fire in his chest. He replayed every second. Tyler's grin, her shock, the tears, the shame. Anger tried to claw its way out, begging to be unleashed again, but he kept it buried. For her. After the shower, Sophia changed into her soft gray pajamas, her hair damp and brushed behind her shoulders. Her eyes still shone with traces of lingering fear, but she looked more like the girl he knew, bright, intelligent, gentle. Chuck made them both hot chocolate, placing a mug into her hands as they sat on the couch. He wrapped a warm blanket around her shoulders and waited. She didn't have to speak, but he wanted her to know the space was there if she needed it. Finally, she looked up at him with a small smile. "Thank you, Dad." "You never have to thank me for protecting you," he replied, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand. Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder, and he closed his eyes. It was enough for now. But somewhere across town, in a house far larger than anyone needed, another father stared at his phone in rage. High above the city and Oakwood estates, a mansion glowed with artificial light. Floors polished to a mirror shine reflected marble pillars and curated artwork. Robert Hendricks stood before a giant screen displaying security footage and social media feeds. Every news channel, every trending post, every comment section. His son's name lit up all of them like a wildfire that refused to die down. Videos from the mall had already gone viral. Millions of people had shared them. Anger had turned into applause. Righteous justice had found an audience hungry for a hero. The footage was undeniable. Tyler mocking a girl who had done nothing to him. Tyler grabbing the milkshake. Tyler laughing as the liquid drenched her. And then Chuck Norris. Robert clenched his fist around his crystal whiskey glass until his knuckles turned white. On the screen, Chuck's calm and focused fury played on loop. The boy kneeling, the father towering over him, with authority far greater than wealth could buy. Tyler's apology, forced, choked by fear, was now broadcast to the world. Robert hit pause. His reflection stared back at him beside the frozen expression of his son's shame. He wasn't furious that Tyler had bullied a girl. He wasn't furious that his son had been cruel. These were things he had always dismissed as harmless. Boys will be boys, especially boys who would one day inherit a fortune. What enraged him was that Tyler had been stopped, humiliated, powerless, that their family name was trending everywhere, and not for the right reasons. Robert threw his glass across the room. It shattered against the wall, scattering shards like the reputation he thought he controlled. Tyler sat on the couch nearby, small and hunched. The same boy who had laughed with such arrogance hours earlier now wouldn't meet his father's eyes. "What were you thinking?" Robert hissed, advancing like a storm. Tyler only shook his head weakly. I didn't think he'd actually show up." "You filmed yourself assaulting a minor," Robert snapped. "In public, on camera, and you broadcast it like it was entertainment. Do you have any idea the trouble you've caused? My business partners are calling. The school called. The police chief called. All asking me why my son is the villain in the story that the whole country is watching." Tyler finally looked up, tears streaking his face. "Dad, I'm sorry." Robert's expression hardened further. "Sorry doesn't fix a PR disaster. Sorry doesn't erase millions of views." He pointed a shaking finger at the paused frame of Chuck Norris staring down Tyler. "This man," Robert spat, "just declared war on the wrong family, and now I have to clean up your mess." Tyler's voice cracked as he whispered, "What are you going to do?" Robert turned and took a deep breath, smoothing his hair back. The anger remained simmering beneath his polished exterior. "First, we control the damage. My lawyer will contact Mr. Norris and offer a settlement. We might be able to make this disappear, but if he refuses..." He didn't finish the threat. He didn't need to. Back in the Norris home, Chuck and Sophia sat quietly, unaware that the other side was already plotting. Sophia watched the news play a clip of her own humiliation, her face hidden by pixels, but the fear still recognizable. Then the broadcast cut to the mall confrontation. Viewers could hear the applause, the collective relief that, finally, a bully was put in his place. Sophia's cheeks flushed. She shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want everyone to see this," she whispered. "I don't want to be the milkshake girl." Chuck set his mug down and put a reassuring arm around her. "That's not who you are." "But everyone saw," she began. "And what they saw," he interrupted gently, "is that you're not alone. They saw someone stand up for you. They saw justice." Her eyes filled with tears again, not from pain this time, but from the beginning flicker of hope. The next day, when Sophia walked into school with Emma and Jessica beside her, everything had changed. Students who once glanced past her now watched her with curiosity, sympathy, even admiration. Some smiled tentatively. A few whispered shyly, "Are you okay?" Others looked guilty, remembering their silence at the diner. A group of younger students hurried up to her. One girl of about 13, freckles dotting her nose, spoke softly. "My brother showed me the video," she said. He told me heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear jackets and messy hair and stand up even when they're scared." Sophia blinked, stunned. I'm not a hero." "But your dad is," another kid piped up. "And you're his daughter. That means you're strong too." The words sent warmth blooming through her chest. For months, she'd felt like she was shrinking, becoming invisible. But here now, voices lifted her up. Later that morning, an announcement played over the intercom. The principal's voice was unusually firm. "We are implementing a strict zero-tolerance policy toward bullying. Any and all reports will be investigated immediately. Our students deserve safety and respect." Teachers began paying attention. Hall monitors actually monitored. The atmosphere felt different, brighter in some ways, shakier in others. Victims began speaking out. Bullies began thinking twice. The mural in the main hallway, freshly painted by the art club, declared in bold letters, "Stand up, speak out, protect each other." Sophia stared at it for a long moment, her own reflection ghosting over the bright colors. She felt taller, but above all, she felt seen, not as a victim, but as someone who mattered. At home that evening, Chuck received a phone call. He didn't recognize the number, but something told him who it might be. He answered with a short, controlled, "Hello." The voice on the other end was smooth, a lawyer's voice. "Mr. Norris, my name is David Chen. I represent the Hendricks family. My client would like to arrange a private discussion." "I'm listening," Chuck said. "We understand your daughter was distressed," Chen continued, careful to avoid any admission of guilt. "The Hendricks family is willing to offer compensation for any emotional damage or reputational harm." "No amount of money will change what happened," Chuck interrupted coldly. "You can't buy away consequences, and you can't make me forget the fear in my daughter's eyes." The lawyer paused. "Surely there must be something we can do to resolve this amicably." "Tell your client," Chuck said, voice low and unwavering, "that if he or his father or anyone tied to their money tries to intimidate my daughter again, we will not be talking. We will be fighting, and I promise you, that's a fight they can't afford." There was silence, then a forced, tight reply, "I'll relay the message." Chuck hung up before anything else could be said. He turned to Sophia, who had been listening from the sofa, anxiety written across her face. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "Better than okay," he said. "Your voice is being heard. People are paying attention. And the ones who hurt you, they're afraid now." Sophia exhaled shakily, sitting back against the cushions. "You think this will really change anything?" He looked at her, really looked. The way she sat straighter now, the way her eyes didn't dart to the exit every few seconds, the way she breathed a little easier. "It already has," he said. Videos continued spreading across the world. People in faraway cities in different countries watched a girl stand with her head held high beside a father who showed that silence is not the answer. They watched a bully crumble under the weight of his own actions. The internet had seen plenty of humiliation, but this time, the punchline wasn't cruelty. It was justice. In the following weeks, anti-bullying organizations reached out to the school. Celebrities posted messages of support. News anchors debated whether Chuck Norris had gone too far or just far enough. The general public had chosen a side, and it wasn't the one with deep pockets. Still, in the highest house on the hill, in the mansion built of glass and arrogance, a man poured another drink into a fresh glass. Robert Hendricks stared out over the city he thought he controlled and realized he was losing his grip. His son was broken. His power was questioned. And worst of all, this was still only the beginning. "This isn't over," he whispered into the empty room, fingers tightening around the glass. "It's far from over." And somewhere in the city below, Chuck and Sophia sat together, unaware of the next storm forming, but ready to face whatever came next. Because now, they weren't just fighting for justice. They were fighting to change everything. The sun rose slowly over Riverside High, casting long beams of light through the large glass windows of the main entrance. Students streamed into the hallway, their voices filling the air with the familiar Saturday morning kind of energy, despite it being just another weekday. Lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked, laughter bounced from wall to wall. But underneath the everyday noise, something new vibrated through the school in alertness. A caution, a growing awareness that things were changing. Sophia stepped out of her dad's truck, grateful for the warmth of the sun on her face. She smoothed the sleeves of her blue sweater and took a steadying breath. The world looked the same, but she wasn't the same girl who had walked into that diner days before. She wasn't the invisible girl at the corner locker anymore. She wasn't a victim. Beside her walked Emma and Jessica, loyal and protective like shadows that refused to leave her side. The three girls paused just before the entrance. Sophia felt anxiety twist deep in her stomach. Memories of laughter, phones recording, milkshake dripping. She closed her eyes. Then her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Being strong doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you don't let fear win." She opened her eyes and stepped inside. Heads turned instantly. Conversations stopped. A group of students whispered her name in awe. One boy, who had laughed at the diner, now looked at her with guilt and lowered his eyes. A teacher she barely knew gave her a supportive nod. There were smiles, brief, shy, but meaningful. They saw her now. Really saw her. It was overwhelming. "Sophia!" someone called behind her. She turned to see Michael Chen, quiet, polite, always sitting in the back of math class. He hurried over, clutching the strap of his backpack. He looked nervous but determined. I wanted to say," he swallowed hard, "thank you for standing up. What your dad did, what you did, it helped me." Sophia blinked. "Helped you how?" Michael took a deep breath. "Every day since the beginning of the year, a group of juniors has been taking my lunch, pushing me into lockers. I never had the courage to tell anyone, but after seeing what happened at the mall, I realized," his eyes watered slightly, "I shouldn't have to take it. So I told the counselor yesterday, and they're already being questioned." Sophia's heart squeezed with empathy. She placed a hand on his arm. "I'm so sorry you went through that." He offered a trembling smile. "It's getting better now, because of you." She watched him leave and exhaled, feeling something powerful grow inside her. Pride. Not for the video, not for the spectacle, but for the change it had sparked. Throughout the day, more kids approached her. A freshman girl admitted she had been tormented by a clique for months. A senior boy confessed he'd been too scared to talk about his anxiety. They all came with different stories, different scars, yet all had found courage from seeing her stand up in the face of humiliation. Sophia realized that what happened had done something bigger than anyone expected. It had opened a door, not just for her, but for every kid who had stayed silent out of fear. In the afternoon, her math teacher asked her to stay after class. Mrs. Porter was a kind woman with silver-streaked hair and thoughtful eyes. "I saw what you did," she began gently, resting her glasses on the table. "I saw the way you carried yourself, even when you were hurting." She reached across the desk and squeezed Sophia's hand. "You inspired more than students. You reminded us teachers what our job truly is, to protect, to listen. I want you to know, I'm here for you." Sophia's throat tightened. "Thank you." she whispered, meaning it deeply. When the final bell rang, Sophia walked outside feeling lighter and taller. The air tasted crisp, like winter was still lingering, but spring insisted on pushing through anyway. As she approached the pickup line, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. With trembling fingers, she opened it. There was only one sentence. Check your mailbox when you get home. She frowned, unease flickering in her chest. But she didn't mention it to Emma or Jessica. They had already worried enough. She climbed into the passenger seat of her father's truck, and he glanced at her with his usual mixture of concern and strength. How was school? He asked. Sophia smiled. Better. He didn't ask for details. He could see the truth in her eyes. He tapped her hand once, then started the engine. The drive home was peaceful. Familiar houses rolled past. The neighborhood looked ordinary, safe, a stark contrast to the anxiety that had ruled her heart just days ago. When they pulled into the driveway, Sophia's eyes drifted toward the mailbox. A cold chill slid down her spine. I'll get it, she said quickly, before Chuck could even reach for his seatbelt. He watched carefully as she walked to the curb. She opened the mailbox. Inside was an envelope, white, creased, handwritten address. Her name. She hesitated, then returned to the truck's hood where Chuck now stood, waiting. He noticed her cautious expression and stiffened. What is it? Sophia swallowed. A letter. He didn't like surprises. He watched every move she made as she tore open the envelope, unfolded the paper, and began to read. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught. Chuck stepped forward immediately. Sophia, what is it? His voice was sharp, ready to respond to threat. Sophia shook her head slowly, stunned. It's from Tyler. Chuck's body tensed like stone cracking under pressure. What does he want? She held up the letter, rereading. The handwriting was messy, uneven, the words shaky but honest. Sophia, it took only 10 seconds for me to destroy someone else's dignity, and months for me to confront my own. They sent me to a military school on the other side of the country. It is not fun. They yell a lot. We wake up before sunrise, and I am treated exactly how I treated others, worse even. They watch the videos here. They know who I was. There's no running from it anymore. No lawyers, no money. Just me and the damage I left behind. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because I want to be better. Because I finally understand how it feels. To be powerless. To be afraid. To be alone. You didn't just change my life. You changed a lot of others too. And for that, I needed to say thank you. I'm sorry. Tyler, Sophia's hands trembled as she lowered the paper. Chuck's expression darkened, not from anger, but from reflection. He knew genuine remorse when he saw it. He also knew it was rare. How do you feel? He asked gently. Sophia looked up at him, her eyes soft but strong. I think, she paused, searching for the right words. I think people can change if they really want to. Chuck nodded slowly. It was a lesson his wife had taught him many times. Sophia continued, but change doesn't erase what he did. It doesn't erase how it felt. Those scars, they're still there, and I won't pretend they're not. You don't have to, Chuck said softly. She exhaled, calmer now. She folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope. But I'm glad he's trying. That means the world isn't hopeless. Chuck smiled, a real proud smile. You sound like your mother. That single sentence made Sophia's heart ache and glow all at once. She slipped her hand into her father's, and they walked toward the house together. Later that evening, the Hells Angels know, not bikers in this version, instead a community group of veterans and skilled protectors that Chuck led gathered in their old headquarters for a meeting. Leather jackets and loud engines were gone, replaced by jackets with discreet patches and men who carried themselves like guardians rather than warriors. They weren't criminals. They were fathers, husbands, uncles, men who had spent a lifetime learning how to fight, now trying to learn how to guide. One of the children in the room, a girl named Maya, stood up nervously, hands clasped as if holding on to courage with fingertips alone. I want to say something, she whispered. Everyone turned. She was trembling, but she pushed through. I was being bullied too. Her voice cracked. I didn't tell anyone because I was scared my dad would get in trouble. But after what happened, I realized silence only makes it worse. Her father rose beside her, eyes glassy with pride as he rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. She smiled, barely, through tears. Chuck looked around the room, at his men fighters hardened by life, yet softened by love for their families. He saw understanding, shame, relief, respect. He stepped forward. All our life, he said, voice deep and steady, we've been told strength is measured in fists and fights, in how much pain we can inflict. He shook his head. But that's not strength. He looked at Sophia, who watched him with admiration shining in her eyes. Strength is protecting the people you love without becoming what you hate, he continued. Strength is listening when someone you care about needs help. It is standing up not just for yourself, but for those who think they can't stand at all. He took a deep breath, letting his gaze land on each man there. So starting today, we change. Not because we were weak before, but because our children deserve better. They deserve fathers who fight the right battles, in the right way. A quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Sophia felt emotions swell in her chest. Tears blurred her vision, but they were warm, hopeful tears. She had never felt more proud of her father. She stepped forward, and her voice rose clearly across the room. Courage doesn't mean you're not scared, she said. It means doing what's right, even when you are. Everyone listened. Everyone understood. In that moment, the girl who once felt powerless commanded a room full of powerful men, and the men listened. After the meeting, the kids gathered around Sophia, asking questions, asking advice, asking how it felt to finally stand up for herself. She answered each one honestly, feeling stronger with every word she spoke. Later, as the group filtered out into the night, Chuck placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder and nodded toward the big front windows. She followed his eyes. Outside, the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, and standing at the very edge of the light, watching calmly, was someone she hadn't expected to see so soon. Robert Hendricks, the face of wealth, power, pride. His presence was a warning, a statement, a threat. Chuck's eyes narrowed. Sophia's hand found his. The battle against the bully was over. But the war with his father had just begun. The night air pressed heavy against the windows of the headquarters, thick with a tension that no one dared put into words. Chuck stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the silhouette outside. Robert Hendricks remained still under the streetlight hands, buried in the pockets of his expensive coat. Posture impeccable, jaw set like granite. It wasn't the pose of a man ready to talk. It was the stance of someone preparing to wage a very personal war. Sophia's breath hitched when she recognized him. Chuck felt her grip tighten around his hand. He gave her a soft squeeze in return, never taking his eyes away from the man outside. Fear was not allowed to grow roots here, not while he stood. Stay inside, he said, his voice calm but leaving no room for argument. Sophia only nodded. She knew when not to push him, not because he might snap, but because she saw the storm behind his composure. He wasn't angry in the way people shouted or broke things. Chuck was the kind of furious that turned silent, precise, focused, the kind that didn't make mistakes. He stepped forward and opened the front door. The coolness of the night brushed against his face, a contrast to the heat of adrenaline pulsing steady in his veins. Robert didn't flinch as Chuck approached. The two stood face to face, equal in height but worlds apart in everything that mattered. Robert spoke first, his voice smooth as polished steel. That was quite a show you put on, Mr. Norris. Chuck didn't answer. Words from him were earned, not given. Robert clicked his tongue and shook his head slightly, as if disappointed. You think humiliating my son in public was justice? He asked. You've only unleashed something you won't be able to contain. Chuck's expression didn't change. Your son humiliated my daughter. I ensured she got her dignity back. That's not revenge, that's balance. Robert took a step forward, voice lowering to a dangerous hush. Balance, he scoffed. You think this is about some spilled milkshake? Do you have any idea who I am? Chuck finally spoke, his words cold and final. A man who believes his money is a shield, a man who has never been told no, a man who thought his son could hurt others without consequences. He leaned in slightly. But this time, you're wrong. Robert's smile flickered thin, sharp-edged, venomous. You think you scared him into changing? You think you can play hero and walk away clean? His voice hardened. I don't lose. Not in business. Not in politics. And certainly not to some washed-up action star. Chuck remained still, every muscle coiled but controlled. This isn't a movie, Robert, he said. If you push this further, you won't be the one writing the script. Robert's nostrils flared, but he forced himself back into composure. Here's what's going to happen, he said, adjusting his cufflinks like a man sealing a deal. You tell your daughter to delete those videos. You apologize to my son for manhandling him. And you keep your distance. He paused. In return, I'll forget this ever happened. Chuck stared at him for a long moment, the silence so absolute that even the crickets seemed to stop singing. Finally, he spoke. No. Robert's composure shattered. His jaw dropped, eyes widening in disbelief. He wasn't accustomed to that word. It hit him harder than any punch could have. Chuck stepped closer, lowering his voice enough that Robert had to listen. You should be asking what you can do to help your son become a better person. Because if you keep enabling him, one day you'll be bailing him out of something far worse than a viral video. Robert's mask slipped completely now, revealing a man whose ego had finally been pierced. You've made a powerful enemy, he hissed. Chuck didn't blink. The only power that matters, he said, is what you stand for. He turned away, finished with the conversation. But Robert wasn't. He lunged forward and grabbed Chuck's arm. It was a mistake he would never repeat. Without raising his voice, without theatrics, Chuck pivoted and locked Robert's wrist in a grip so swift that Robert barely understood what had happened. Pain flashed across his face as Chuck leaned in, his voice a whisper that struck like a hammer. I don't want to hurt you, Chuck said, but I will protect my daughter. And if you ever threaten her again, you'll learn firsthand that I'm not the one who should be afraid. He released him abruptly. Robert stumbled back, rubbing his wrist, shock replacing anger for a brief moment. Chuck walked back into the building without another glance. Robert remained frozen in place, his pride bleeding out into the night. Inside, the room fell silent as Chuck returned. Every eye was trained on him. Even the toughest men there, combat veterans and battle-scarred protectors, knew better than to speak first. Sophia rushed up, eyes wide with worry. Dad, are you okay? Chuck placed his hands on her shoulders and smiled gently. Never better, he assured. The other men nodded in approval. They had witnessed leaders before, but few like this. Sophia rested her head against Chuck's chest, and he wrapped an arm around her. The room exhaled, tension releasing all at once. But in the back of their minds, each one knew the truth. Robert Hendricks wouldn't walk away quietly. Later that night, father and daughter sat on the couch again, the soft glow of the lamp casting golden light around them. Chuck read the letter Tyler had sent once more, carefully folding it afterward and placing it on the table. Sophia watched him, nervous. Do you think Tyler really wants to change? She asked. Chuck considered the question seriously. I think he's scared, he said. And sometimes fear is the first step toward change. But real change? He placed a hand over hers. That comes from wanting to be better, not just avoiding consequences. Sophia nodded. She understood. She also understood that forgiveness didn't happen overnight. Healing didn't either. But, Chuck continued, I also think he saw something in you that he didn't expect. He smiled softly. He saw strength. Sophia thought about the mural at school, the kids who had found courage because of her, the teacher who offered support, the letter in the envelope. Her heart felt lighter. I didn't feel strong, she admitted. That's because strength doesn't feel like power, Chuck said. It feels like doing what's right even when everything in you wants to run. Sophia leaned into him once more. Mom would be proud of us, she whispered. Chuck's chest tightened, emotions stirring beneath the surface. Yes, he said quietly. She would. They sat like that for a long while, just breathing, just existing in a moment of peace that felt well-earned. Eventually, Sophia lifted her head. What happens next? She asked. Chuck brushed a strand of hair from her face. We live, he said simply. We stand up. We speak out. We protect each other. And when the world tries to knock us down again, which it will, we get back up. Together. Sophia smiled. I like that. Chuck kissed the top of her head. Good, he said, because that's who we are. The house grew quiet, calm, blanketed in the kind of silence that only comes when fear has been replaced by resolve. In her room, Sophia later sat at her desk, pen in hand, writing a reply to Tyler's letter, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. A reminder that everyone has a path to choose. In the living room, Chuck gazed at a framed family photo, a younger Sophia laughing between him and his late wife. He felt sorrow and pride and determination all at once. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Bullies didn't disappear just because you punched one of them metaphorically into the ground. But change had started. A ripple had been born, and ripples become waves. Outside, the street was quiet again. No shadows lurked, no threats waited. Just a peaceful night in a city learning to stand a little taller. But Chuck stayed awake a little longer just in case. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's a man sitting guard in the dark, making sure the morning comes safely. That night, Sophia slept without nightmares. And Chuck? He watched over her like the unbreakable wall he was. Justice had won. Not perfectly, not easily, but undeniably. And it would continue to win as long as they stood together. The end, and yet a beginning.